All right, good day. How are you all doing? Nice to see you here today. Before we get started, I wanted to put in a plug for a speaker they're having at the United Church of Christ tonight at 7 p.m. They have Sami Rassouli. I'm not sure if I'm pronouncing that correctly. Sami Rassouli is an Iraqi American who lived in Minnesota for many years before returning to Iraq after the U.S. invasion and occupation. Sami works in Iraq with the Muslim Peacemakers Team, a group dedicated to the principles of nonviolence. He'll speak about the current situation in Iraq today from the point of view of the Iraqi people, how they view their political system and the continued U.S. presence, in addition to efforts at reconciliation within Iraq, building cities devastated by ISIS, the impact of refugees, and Iraqis' hopes for the future. One of his goals during this visit is to inform Minnesotans about the English for Reconciliation program in Iraq and to recruit Americans interested in participating in the program. So this is sponsored by the Brainerd Area Coalition for Peace. So it kind of meshes with our speaker on the Middle East today. And you just give me a moment here. So our speaker, Tera Weyer, graduated, I almost said Megan, sister, graduated from Staples-Motley in 2012 and then from North Central University in Minneapolis in 2016 and left for Oman in January of 2017 and was there until just this past March. Her bachelor's degree is in cross-cultural communications, and she has 2 minors in Christian theology and Islamic theology. So please join me in welcoming Tera Weyer.
Hello. This is it. Here we go. It's so great to be with you today and to present on the country that I lived in for 2 years and a couple months. And it was such a wonderful opportunity for me. And so to have people who are interested in knowing a little bit more about a country across the world is a great opportunity. So as Profe Jimenez said, I graduated from Staples in 2012, got a bachelor's degree in communications, and then I had a desire, I don't know where it came from, to learn Arabic. And it's one of the most difficult languages to learn for English speakers. But I knew that if I was going to learn it, I had to live somewhere that spoke Arabic and that I could practice with local people. So I did some research and found a school in Muscat, Oman. And I had never heard of Oman before I moved there. And so I did my research and found a school run by some Americans, so I knew that someone would be able to understand me. And I moved there in January of 2017. I completed 4 full-time semesters of Arabic language learning, and that was my visa. And so I was a student on a student visa. I lived in an Omani community and was able to practice with them outside of school. And it was a wonderful opportunity to learn language. But as many sociologists say, language is very much paired with culture. And so through my experience, I had the opportunity to also learn about Omani culture in a very up-close way because they were my neighbors and they were my teachers and whatnot. So today, we're just going to go over some things about Oman. If you have questions throughout, jot them down, and there'll be time at the end for a few of you to ask some questions. But in general, just enjoy learning about somewhere outside of Minnesota, outside of America, and a culture that's very different from our own. So this is a picture of the Omani flag made out of Legos, so not an exact rendering, but at the time, it was the biggest flag in the world made out of Legos. But the Sultanate of Oman is a country in the Arabian Peninsula, which is Saudi Arabia is the majority of the peninsula, and then the countries surrounding it also are included. Oman is on the right side, and it is actually a big country geographically, but it has a very small population for its land size. So of that, which covers about the size, the land area of Minnesota, the Dakotas and Wisconsin, there's only 4 million people. And a majority of them live in the north, in Muscat, the capital where that star is. And that's where I lived, was in the capital. So about 80% of the population of Oman is Omanis. The other 20%, or rising to 30%, is foreign people. So this whole area of the world is very, very wealthy, with the exception of Yemen, who's in a civil war, because of oil. And so they have taken oil from the ground and have sold it to America and other countries, and have become very wealthy because of that. And so because they're wealthy, a lot of them do not do labor, hard labor, and so they bring in the labor force from across the Indian Ocean, from India and Pakistan, from Bangladesh and Malaysia and all of those. So a lot of their labor force is foreign. So if you look at populations numbers, 70 to 80% are Omani. The others are those people that they import to do all of their hard labor. And so it was interesting to join them. And in the oil fields and in the oil companies, there are also a lot of Western people who live there. So there are Americans, British, Australians, and whatnot. So I was not the only white face in the country, although the number of white faces were pretty low. So this whole area is known as the Arabian Peninsula, and they all speak the same dialect of Arabic. And so we'll come back to that in a little bit. So Oman, as you may have seen on the posters for today, is known as the land of frankincense. Whoop. There we go. So frankincense, which is the sap of a bush, essentially, is only found in a couple places in the world naturally. And so for you, those of you who have heard of essential oils, Young Living essential oils gets all of their frankincense from Oman, and it's becoming a little more popular in the West to hear about frankincense. But Omanis have used frankincense for digestion issues and whatnot since centuries before, because it grows naturally in Oman. So they take the sap from the tree, and then they put it on an incense burner. So the picture on the left is of a giant incense burner, but there are small ones, approximately 6 inches tall, in every Omani home. And they put some charcoal down, some frankincense on top, and they'll light it, and then it'll smoke the house out. And that incense and that smell is very popular in Oman. And anytime you would go into an Omani home, they would burn it for you. It's a sign of prosperity. And so it's a very interesting smells to walk into a smoky house and be completely normal about it. So I brought some frankincense with me today, if you'd like to come up afterwards, just to smell it or take a little piece of it. So it's very popular and very cheap in Oman, less cheap in America. But the Omanis are very proud of their frankincense. And so when they hear stories of that involve frankincense, so like the Christmas story of the wise men bringing Jesus gold, frankincense, and myrrh, they're like, oh, they must be Omani. They have to be. It's a great connection that they make. Oman is the only country on that map that we saw earlier that has a wide variety of geographical features. And so most of the Arabian Peninsula is desert, and a majority of Oman is also desert. But Oman also boasts thousands of miles of beaches, and they are beautiful. I would highly recommend going to Oman on a tourist visa and check it out, because Oman is a very little-known country. And so the beaches are not full or packed. They're white sand beaches, and they have some of the best snorkeling in the world. But they boast all of these things. But they're not quite up to it on advertising all their touristic possibilities. And so right now it's a very little known, which means that it would be great for some of you to go there and experience Oman before it becomes too popular and the beaches are all crowded and there's no place to sit. So and some of the most beautiful places in the world are in Oman. It also has two ranges of mountains, which is a little strange to find right up next to the desert. So from the north, from Muscat, it's the beaches, and then there's mountains right away, and then there's a giant desert. And so these mountains are great for rock climbing and hiking. It's also where they grow a lot of roses. And so there's a big rose festival if you'd like to go to that. And the mountains provide a little bit of a respite from the extreme temperatures. So Oman is a very hot location, and especially in the capital where it's right against the water, it's also humid. And so the temperatures in the winter time, so in the dead of winter, the middle of January, it'll be about 80 degrees, 75 to 80 degrees in the daytime. And then in the summers, the highs during the day are 120, and at night it'll maybe get down to 100 degrees. And so it's very hot. So as a Minnesotan going over there, it was a little, a big change. But I was very surprised that they handle the extreme heat the same way we handle the extreme cold. So just like in the middle of January, you don't leave your house unless you need to. In the middle of summer there, they do not leave their house unless they need to. And they go from air-conditioned houses to air-conditioned cars to air-conditioned malls. And we do the same thing, but with heaters. So I was experiencing a little bit of cabin fever my first summer in Oman. And I felt, this is so similar. Like, I know this feeling, but it was sunny every day. Just no clouds in the sky at all. And so it was a very different experience for me to have those same feelings of cabin fever, but to have it be so hot instead of cold. So the mountains provide a great place, even in the summertime where the temperatures are cooler. And in the winter, it might snow maybe an inch one time on the highest mountain in Oman. And when that happens, the Omanis think that they're going to die. So this last winter, I was still in Oman, and my family was sending me pictures of the huge storms that we were having and the extreme cold temperatures. And I came into school, and I showed my teacher the pictures of the snow drifts and whatnot. And she said, "This is impossible. You cannot live there." And I was like, I lived there for most of my life. And she goes, "But it's so cold." And I was like, and I told her how cold it was. And she said, "No, nothing can live when it is that cold. Nothing can live when it's 0 degrees." And I was like, "You just don't know." So the government of Oman is an absolute monarchy, and this picture is the picture of the Sultan. His name is Sultan Qaboos bin Said al-Said, and he took power in a coup from his father in 1970. And since 1970, almost everything that you'll see in Oman today is because of Sultan Qaboos. So he took power from his father because his father was not utilizing the oil there, and he was not aiming for the people of Oman to enter the modern age. And so before he took power, there was no schools throughout the country. There were only a few hospitals. There was not electricity, and all of these things that the people needed, and Sultan Qaboos recognized that. And so he took power from his father and built schools and roads and electricity and malls, and he utilized oil and brought all that wealth that they now know to the people. And before that, they had none of it. And so if you ask any Omani their feelings towards Sultan Qaboos, it is always wonderful gratitude. A few of my teachers can't talk about Sultan Qaboos without crying. And so the love and respect they have for their Sultan runs so deep because they know that everything they have is because of him. And so there's a very good relationship between the government and the people in Oman, which is not something you always find in the Middle East. And so it was very nice to know that. Another thing that's good to know about Sultan Qaboos is that he is very much a national leader. So he has never established himself as a religious leader, and that has led to the nation of Oman being a very peaceful nation. So in a lot of ways, Oman is the Switzerland of the Middle East. So they don't get involved in the back and forth between Qatar and Saudi and Iran and all of those. They don't get involved, and they always remain neutral. And so it was very, very safe for me to live there. I know that that's a big question for someone living in the Middle East. But it was very safe to live there. Crime is very low because they value so much keeping peace. And one of the reasons is because of their leader, Sultan Qaboos. Another reason that they value peace is because of their sect of Islam. So the majority religion of the nation of Oman is Islam. But there are, just like there are many denominations of Christianity, so there are Protestants and Catholics and Orthodox, and we can go on and on. In Islam, the same idea occurs. So many of you have probably heard about Sunnis and Shia, which is the two biggest sects of Islam. But under Sunnism, under Sunni, there are many different denominations, if you will. And one of those is Abadi Islam. So Abadi Islam is primarily found in Oman, but also a few pockets in Pakistan and other places. But the foundation of Abadi Islam is peace and harmony. So they value peace and they value involving everyone and keeping the boat, not rocking the boat too much within Abadi Islam. And so a majority of Omanis are that sect of Islam. So that's another reason that you find Islam to be a very peaceful place. It also tends to lead to generalizations of Omanis being universalist in their ideas about religion. So although they believe very deeply in Islam, they in general will accept people of other religions. And so although I am not a Muslim, and they knew that from the very beginning because I didn't wear a lot of clothes and I didn't do the prayers with them and whatnot, they knew from the beginning I was not Islamic, but I was accepted in the community despite that. And so they very much value peace, and they're very, very loving people. So this is a picture of Sultan Qaboos Grand Mosque. So this is the largest mosque in Oman, and it is very elaborately built. It was built in the early 2000s by Sultan Qaboos, so the same sultan who gave them everything else built them this grand mosque. Inside of this mosque, 7,000 prayers can be there. I got a picture on the inside too. And it has this giant chandelier. And at one point, when it was first built, this was the largest chandelier in the world. But so since then, other places have built larger ones. And so in this room, 5,000 male prayers can be there. There's a separate building for women who would like to pray. But that's also a little difference in Oman, is that women in Oman are encouraged and tend to pray in their houses more than they pray in the mosque. And so they prefer to do it in the comfort of their home. But the men will go to mosque 5 times a day. So this is the largest mosque in Oman, but it is not the only one by far. So in my small neighborhood of maybe 10,000 people, maybe, there were 4 mosques, and they were all within walking distance. And so you'll see that if you visit Oman, there's always a mosque within walking distance of you, because the men very much value praying in the mosque when the call to prayer goes out. And so you'll hear the call to prayer that sounds a little bit like a song, and then within 15 minutes, you'll see all of the men of the neighborhood come out and walk to the mosque to do their prayers. But the women will always pray in their homes. So this giant mosque is most of the time only filled on Fridays, which is their holy day. So instead of Sunday, like we have in America, Friday is their holy day, which also means that their work week is Sunday through Thursday, which was a little different for me to get used to. So in this room, 5,000 can fit, and then an extra 2,000 can fit on the outside. There's a courtyard right outside the doors. And when they go there, they do the communal prayers. And then on Friday, there's a speech or a lecture, a sermon, I guess, from the religious leader, and that happens at the front of the mosque and then is projected to the rest of the people who are not in the building, or if they're in the courtyard, they can still hear on the outside. So you'll find that the architecture of this mosque kind of pulls from different pieces of architecture from around the Middle East. And so the columns with the white and the black marble around the top are from Egypt primarily, and then the mosaics on the ceiling come from Morocco, and then they had to throw in some oil wealth and put it in a large chandelier. So you'll not always find a chandelier inside of a mosque, but it really is a very beautiful building, very beautifully made, and they're very proud of it. As I said earlier, I was a full-time Arabic language student, and so that picture on the left is me standing in front of my school. The school was the 4th and 5th floors of that yellow building, and all of my teachers were Omani, and so we had 100% Arabic from day one. So I don't know if that's how it is in the Spanish classes here at CLC or other language classes, but we did 100% Arabic language from day one. So before I knew the alphabet, they were speaking to me in Arabic, and I had no idea what was going on. But in that immersive context, you have to learn quickly, or you'll just fall behind and just sit there and be a rock. So our teachers were very good at coaching us through those first couple weeks, and then we learned the alphabet, which is a bit different from English, and we learned how to write a little bit from the beginning and whatnot. But a big difference between English and Arabic, one of them, there are very many, is that the written form of Arabic, so the written and what you would read in a newspaper, the language spoken in the news, is very different from the language that's spoken on the street. And so there are essentially two languages that I learned. Both have the name of Arabic, but are very different. They're different in grammar structure, different in vocabulary, different in pronunciation. And so half of my day was in that written form. So I would do my writing homework, and we would learn modern standard Arabic is what it's called, and we would learn grammar and very strict rules and whatnot. And then we would do 2 hours of that, and then 2 hours of colloquial language. And so our teachers would throw off their teacher hats and just talk to us the way that they normally would. And it was very different. And even within Oman, there are different dialects of Arabic. So different ways that someone would pronounce something. So like in America, how up here in Minnesota, we have a bit of an accent, just like people in Georgia have a bit of an accent. And you can kind of tell where people are from based on how they speak. And the same concept applies in Oman. So we had teachers from all over the country. So not only were we trying to learn Arabic in its written form and be able to read and write, we also had to learn Arabic based on our teachers. So some of our teachers were from the north, some were from the south, some were from the east, and they all pronounced things differently. And so we had to listen so closely and try to figure out what they were saying. So if we knew I'll give you an example. A big difference is the way that the J sound is pronounced. So it could be J, or sometimes it's pronounced with a G sound, and sometimes it's a yeah. So the word for chicken is dajaj. That's how it's written. Like if you read every letter, it's dajaj. But some parts of Oman will say dagag. And so you'd have to listen to that. And other parts of Oman would say dayaya. And so you would have to listen to all of those things and try and figure out. You have to remember which teacher's from the north. So she's going to say dayaya, and she's going to pronounce that as a ya sound. And you'd have to remember all of these. And so it was a difficult learning experience, but very beneficial. Because at the end of it, if I met somebody on the street, I would know where in Oman they were from based on how they were speaking. So I could listen However, my speaking was mostly Muscat, so I would speak in the same way that people from Muscat would learn. Unless I was hanging out with a friend from the East for too long, and then I would start to speak like her, and I'd go back to my other friends from the North, and they'd say, "Where did you learn that? Who taught you that?" And so it came up with many funny language stories from learning Arabic, because many words are very close to each other. And so it was a great experience of learning Arabic. It's very difficult. So if you want something difficult to learn, I highly recommend learning Arabic. And at the end of the 4 semesters, I'm conversational on most topics. So I can get my way around almost any situation, except something very like deep in the culture or like economics. I can't really talk about economics. So very specific examples. But in general, I'm conversational, which is very cool. And I can take what I learned in Oman and go to any of those countries that we saw on the map. So anywhere in the Arabian Peninsula, they'll 100% know that I learned in Oman, because there are also different dialects around the peninsula itself. But they will be able to understand me. And so the opportunities for jobs in the future are wide open in that area of the world because I took the time to learn. And that's also not something that a lot of foreigners will do. So those people who come and work for the oil companies, they won't learn Arabic. And so they'll get by using English, which is definitely possible. Omanis know English for the most part. You can find very good English speakers. Wealthier families will send their kids to America or to Europe for higher education, and so they will be very fluent in English. So you can get around only using English. So if you want to go and try your visit in Oman, you can get by. But to have a foreigner, especially from America, come to Oman and learn language was very, very surprising to them. So every time I would go and meet somebody new, so in the very beginning, I would go down to the beach. So, there we go. So the beach walks and these walking paths along the ocean are very popular in Oman. And Omanis will be out there every night walking, sometimes during the day in the wintertime if it's not too hot. And so I would go out and with my very little Arabic from the very beginning, and I would greet them and I'd say, "Assalamu alaikum, ismi Tera. Hello, my name is Tera. I'm from America. Are you from Oman?" And they would say, "Oh, you speak Arabic. You sit down, have coffee with me, have this." And I would do the sentences I knew, like, "I'm a student learning Arabic. I have 2 sisters and 1 brother." So at the very beginning, the very basics, and they would be just eating it up. They would be so happy that I was learning Arabic. And then I get to the end of it, and I would know like nothing else. So if they said something to me, maybe I understood them. And at the end, I would just say, "I don't know any more Arabic." And they would laugh, and they would have me sit down, and they would try new things. And so at the very beginning, they would always invite me to sit down. And so we'll talk a little bit more about hospitality later. But they would have me sit down, and they would quiz me. So they would pick up the things that they had with them. They'd say, "What's this?" And I would try and remember the Arabic word for it. And if I got it wrong, they'd be like, "Blah, blah," and they became my teachers. And so it was a very good experience. And a lot of it has to do with the kindness of Omanis. But they also were so excited to have a foreigner, a Westerner, an American, like learn their language and try and make mistakes all the time. And because for a long time, I spoke just like a little kid. And so even though I was a grown adult and I could like live in my own house and all that, I could not communicate. And so it's a very interesting experience to humble yourself enough to learn a new language where you become a child and you say things like with the wrong grammar and whatnot. And you said, I am running yesterday, like things like that. And so you make those mistakes over and over and over. But the people of Oman were so kind about it, and they were so helpful and patient, and they just loved the fact that we were trying. And so in a lot of cases, it was I would try all my Arabic, and then I'd be done with the Arabic, and then say, can we speak English? And so then they would practice with me, and so it became very much a cultural exchange of language in this area, because they all learn English in school from when they're very little, but they almost never, get a chance to practice speaking. So a lot of them will be able to read and write, but they won't be able to speak and have a conversation. And so they wanted to practice their English. I wanted to practice my Arabic, so it was a very good exchange that we had going on. Another interesting thing about the beach is that although they have thousands of miles of beaches, very few Omanis know how to swim. And so instead of going to the beach for like swimming or body surfing or any of that, they just go and they sit on the beach and they have their little grills and they will grill meat and they will talk and have fun and they'll play soccer on the beach, but they will not go swimming. And so it was very interesting to me to go to a beach and see no one in the water. So the only people who know how to swim are the fishermen. And so because Oman is on the coast, fishing is the ancient economy of Oman was through fishing. And so the men who go out fishing know how to swim. But as far as women go, very few know how. They're, for the most part, very scared of the water and scared of drowning and scared of getting lost or getting bitten by sharks, even though there aren't very many sharks. And they only come in the wintertime. But they don't swim. And so that was a very interesting thing. But they love going to the beach. So they go to the beach, but they just sit there and watch the waves come in instead of being in them. So we'll go back to the one I forgot. So this is what you would see everyday clothing of Omanis. So the women will wear an abaya, is what the black robe is called, and then a shayla is a headscarf. And so under that, they'll wear like a normal cotton dress that will go down to the floor, go down to their wrists, and up to their neck. It's very important for Omani women to stay modest. And so you'll see they all will wear a headscarf. It's less common to see the face covering, as you probably have seen in the news. It's less common for them to cover their face, but not impossible to see that in Oman. And then what that man is wearing is a dishdasha. And that is what the men wear every day. So that's their normal clothes, is that white dress. And so since it's really hot, wearing white is a good idea. And they will wear the dress because they say it's cool. But it's called a dishdasha, and it's very, every day. That's what they wear. They don't wear jeans and a T-shirt or a polo or pants at any time. They always wear that, which is a little different idea coming from America. And then these are hats. They're called kumma, and they will always wear a hat, the men will, on top of their head that will always match their dishdasha. They're very particular. They have to match it perfectly. So that's why there are so many colors, because they'll get the dishdasha, and on the front, there's a little rope or a string that goes down from the collar. And sometimes, if they're daring, they will get colored stitching and a colored little rope. And so then the color of their kumma, their hat, will match exactly the color that they have in their dishdasha. So they care very much about their appearance, both men and women, but in a little different ways. So the men will care about their dishdasha and their kumma matching, and the women are very particular about their makeup. And so it's always perfectly done, and they can have designs on their abaya. It doesn't have to be just black. They can get embroidery and whatnot. And so it becomes very much its own idea of fashion, a little different from us because we have so much variety. But within their abayas, they can get very fashionable or very common. And so it's an interesting dynamic to see that even though we think it's just a black robe and a white dress, it becomes very important to them about how they dress and how they present themselves. And the men will always wear sandals, which was a little different for me to see. And so they wear sandals everywhere. The women will also normally wear sandals because it's so hot. But this is everyday clothing you would see in Oman, which is different from America. So what I'm wearing today and what I'm wearing in that picture on the left is traditional Omani dress. So for their holidays, they have two big holidays in the year, just like we have Thanksgiving and Christmas. And for every traditional holiday, they will wear traditional clothes. So this is their time to like show off what they have, and they'll all get new dresses and new dish dashes, and everything will be new and perfect. And so it's always some sort of sparkly whatnot for the women, and the men will like have special hats made and whatnot. So it's a very big deal. But for this is traditional Omani dress, as well as the one I'm wearing today. And they're always very beautiful and elaborate and ornate. And this is conservative on the scale of dresses. So they can get much more bedazzled than the one I'm wearing. But it's always so beautiful, and they love to celebrate. And so they will take the opportunity to celebrate, to buy new things, and to have everything look perfect and enjoy the time that they wear it. So the picture on the right is the traditional pit roasted barbecue of the holidays. So they will sacrifice an animal based on the size of their family. So if it's a smaller family, they'll do a goat. If it's a medium-sized family, they'll do a cow or an ox. And if it's a large family, they'll do a camel. And so they will take the number of people that they have and decide what animals they need. And they'll slaughter them in the traditional Islamic way, which is pretty similar to kosher ways of slaughtering. So there are many similarities. But they will butcher it, and they will have a special blend of spices that they rub on the meat, and then they wrap those in banana leaves. If you haven't seen banana leaves, they're very big. And so they'll wrap the meat in the banana leaves. Then they'll take those little packages, and they'll wrap all of it in wicker, like a wicker basket. And then they'll wrap the wicker basket in chicken wire. And so once they have this huge thing, this huge package, they will dig a hole in the ground and light a fire. And they'll get really hot coals on the bottom of it, and they'll like tend the fire for about a day and make sure the coals are really hot. They'll put that big package of meat in there, and they'll bury it. And they just leave it for a day to a day and a half, and they just leave it, and it like sometimes smoke will come up like through the pores of the sand or whatever. So after that, after the day that it sits there and waits, they'll dig it up and they eat it immediately. And so I had a very good friend who was my best cultural informant. And so when the holiday was coming up, she was very adamant that I would be at her house at 11 a.m., which is very odd because Omanis are not normally on time. Like, you'll tell them, okay, like, dinner will start at 7 o'clock, and they'll come at 8:30, and it won't be a problem. And so when my friend was like, you need to be at my house at 11, and I was like, okay. And I was thinking, like, okay, I'll get there at noon, and, like, maybe the food will be ready by 1. But she was like, no, you have to come at 11. And I was like, okay. So I got there at 11, and sure enough, at 11:05, they pulled the meat out of the ground, and they put it on a plate, and we're like, eat it right now, which was really strange to me, but I will say that it is the best meat that I ate in Oman. It was so tender and juicy, and the seasoning that they put on it was so good. And so that's the traditional way to make their holiday meat, is to bury it in the ground, which was not something that I had heard of before, but it is so good. So if you are in Oman, there's a couple of restaurants that will serve it all year round. And so if you go, then you can try it not on the holidays. But with during the holidays, with an Omani family is definitely the best opportunity to try. So Hospitality is one of the greatest aspects of Omani culture because they are so hospitable. So going back to the story of how I was trying to practice my Arabic on the beaches, I would just walk up and say, hello, my name is Tara, I'm from America, are you from Oman? And they would say, sit down. And I would have, they always have coffee and dates and fruit with them, and it's always a wide open door. So I would sit down and I would have coffee with them, but the coffee is a little different. So first of all, they serve it in this tiny glass, like this, and it is spiced with cardamom and cinnamon and a few other things sometimes, and it's never served with sugar, and it's never served with milk. So it's always black, and it's strong. And so they pour it in this little cup. It's called a finjan, and they give it to you, and you drink it, and if you want more, you just hold out your hand like this, and they'll fill it up again. You drink another one. If you love it and you want to keep going, you just eat more and more. But when you're done, you hold out the cup so they see that you're holding it, and you shake it like this, and that signifies to them that you're done drinking coffee. And then they'll take the cup from you and wash it. And so these little cups of coffee became the staple of the hospitality that I experienced in Oman. So anytime you go into an Omani's home, which is frequently because they always invite you. So they would say, sit down, and I would have the coffee and whatnot with them on the beach. They would always say, you have to come to my house. I'd be like, okay, when? And they would say, now. And so we would get up and we would walk to their house. And if they lived in the neighborhood, it was immediately. If not, they were like, you have to give me your number, and they would send me a message on WhatsApp, come to my house. And so their homes are very open, which is something that I was very happily surprised about. So I'd heard that maybe it was difficult to make some friends and difficult to practice, but in Oman I found that it was the opposite. So anytime I would meet a new person, almost certainly I would be invited into their home. And so every time you go, you get these little cups of coffee. You get dates, which are also very popular in Oman because they have many date palms. So it's palm trees that grow dates. And they will have dates fresh or dried, and you eat so many of them. And they also will always have fruit. And so they'll cut up the fruit right in front of you, and you'll eat fruit and dates and coffee every time you go. And if you go for a meal, that's a different story, because they have to prove to you that they are able to provide and be gracious hosts. And so they will make giant spreads of food for a couple people. And it will be so much food, and you'll have to sit there and eat and eat and eat. And so, this one on the left is, this is a meal made for 3 people. So it was one Omani, my friend Hannah, and myself and my roommate. And so it was all of this, and this was like the first course. And so, and keep in mind, this was after we had eaten the fruit and the dates and drank the coffee. And so you get there, and they make you so much food, and it's so delicious, and they are so happy to have you in their home and to invite you into their culture and to learn more about your culture. And so they are some of the nicest people in the world. There's also have been studies on Omanis, and they rank in the top 10 of the kindest people in the world. So most likely to become your friend in a short amount of time. And so another reason you should all visit Oman. And one thing that they always have is desserts. So in this picture on the left, the balls in the top corner, so the brown one and the 2 white ones, those are donuts covered in chocolate or coconut. And then on the other side of the picture, that thing that's white has brown and cookies on top. Those are indeed cookies. So it was a 4-layer dessert that she had made. She had found the recipe online and had tried it, and she was so excited to share. And so there's always dessert, always sweets, always dates, always coffee, always fruit, and always a great conversation with Omanis, because they are some of the nicest people. So an Omani sweet that they are very popular for is halwa. So let's see if the video will work. So they will boil a combination of sugar and butter and honey and other things that it's made of many different things. And they'll boil it in these copper pots for hours and hours until they get this gelatinous sweet. And it's kind of like Jell-O, but a little thicker than Jell-O. And they'll put it in these bowls, and you just eat it by the spoonful. And it is so sweet. And that's how they sweeten their coffee. So when you drink the coffee that's black and strong, you have a spoonful of halwa next to it so that your mouth has something sweet to taste. And so they always go together, and they're very proud of their halwa. So when I was coming back to America, my friend found out that I was leaving and that we didn't have halwa in America. And so she went out and she bought me 4 packages of halwa. And she said, I had it packaged all, this is the travel halwa. So apparently when they go traveling outside of Oman, they also bring halwa with them because it's so important to them. We've got a couple minutes left. So Omani weddings and the process of marriage is very different than in America. So it's a arranged marriage for the most part between the mother of a son and the mother of a daughter. So the mothers will get together normally at other weddings, and they'll say, I have a son, maybe your daughter is interested in him. And so it starts with them. And then the boy, the man, and the woman will be introduced to each other by having the mother of who will become the bride, the woman, will invite the family and the son over to their house, and they'll sit in the same room, and they'll be dressed normally, so he'll be wearing that white dress and the hat, she'll be wearing an abaya and a head covering, and they'll sit on opposite sides of the room, and they'll just have a conversation. And by they, I mean the families will have a conversation. And most of the time, the man and the woman won't actually talk to each other in that meeting. But after the meeting, the family will come to their daughter or go to their son and say, well, what do you think? And from that point, they can either say, yes, he seems good, and then there will be a wedding, or, I don't think so. And then the family will say, but his family is so well known. He has such a good job. He has all of these things. And then if she still says, I don't think so, then they move on and find another man for her. And so it's a system like that where they have to be agreeable at the beginning, but they don't get to know each other before they get engaged and married. And so the process of that ends up being, it can be really long if there's a lot of negotiations between the families, but in general is about 6 months between when they first meet in that meeting to when they are legally married. I say legally married because they have 2 parties. They have an engagement party, after which they are legally married, but are not allowed to live with each other until the wedding, which is a second party. So the parties are very elaborate, and the groom has to pay for all of them. So a big aspect of weddings is that the men will get married normally in their 30s, because by that time they have a job and they are able to pay for all of these parties. They're able to provide a house and gold and perfume and all of these things that the bride's family requires. So it's very much a bride price. And then there's also a dowry that he has to have as well. And so this is a picture of the women's side of a wedding. And so it's always men and women are separate in almost everything in Oman, and weddings for sure. And so the women will have a party, and it will be couches and flowers and all of this thing, a buffet meal, and the women will wear these giant dresses that weigh so much, and they will rent them for use of one day, and they will be thousands of dollars. So I went to this wedding with my friends, and I asked, how much is that dress, this one in the picture? And she said, well, I think it's by this designer, which means it's probably about $8,000. And I was like, $8,000? And she goes, yeah, but she's renting it. And so they'll rent these giant wedding dresses for $8,000 for one day. And they'll always be this giant ballroom style because they say that it's the only day of your whole life you get to wear a dress like that. And so they'll wear them. And so after the engagement party, after the groom provides all of these things for his bride, then they have the wedding, which is a separate party. And after that, they can live together and start their married life. And so it's a very interesting aspect of Omani culture that's very different from America. So that's the women's side. And on the men's side, they will have, so the men will wear the regular dishdasha, maybe one that's a little nicer, and then they will tie a scarf around their kumma. So remember those hats? They'll tie a special scarf around it for very special occasions, so weddings and the holidays. It's called a masr, and they will be all fancy dressed, but instead of having a giant ballroom with flowers and a couch and all of this, they'll just sit on the grass. So they'll lay out these mats, and they will always serve a meal. So it'll be rice and a meat, and they sit there, and you eat it with your hands, and then they'll come around with the dates and the coffee and the halwa, and you just eat, and you sit, and you, from what I hear, I never went to a male side of a wedding, but I have a friend who did. And so they'll sit, and the imam, the holy man of the mosque, will come and will say, recite essentially vows to the husband. He will agree to provide for his wife and to raise the children in the ways of Islam and other things. And he'll agree, and then they'll be married. So the legal process of marriage happens only on the men's side. But before this ceremony happens, the imam will call the bride and ask her if she is agreeable to the marriage. And if she says yes, then the imam will continue. If she says no, then they'll have a discussion and whatnot. So the woman is agreeable to it, but the legal process only happens with men. And so this is the male side of weddings, a little different than the female side. They all wear dishdashas. And at the women's side, because it's only women, it is the only time that the women get to wear whatever they want. And so that's when you see like fully sequenced dresses, short sleeve dresses, like maybe dresses that go above the knee if they're very daring. And so it's the only time for them to really cut loose is at a wedding because they know that there will be no men there. And so that's very important. And then when the men do come, you'll be dancing and eating and having a good time. And then an announcer will say, the groom is coming, the groom is coming. And then all the women will stop what they're doing and put their abayas on and put their headscarves on and just sit there and wait for him to come. And so it's a very interesting aspect, but they value modesty so highly that it's very common. So there's your little short introduction to Oman and the culture. We've got a few minutes for questions. If any have burning questions, we've got a couple. We'll start in the back corner. The question is, do women have any rights within marriage? So are there annulments or divorces